And then last but not least is a very simple report. It's a request detail report. And the purpose of the request detail report is simply to show me what students specifically have requested a course. Because it's not a perfect world and we don't have 80 spots in a class and only 80 students pick that class and we go, excellent, we're good. Being able to look at who selected a course and identify who maybe needs to get moved, that's the purpose of the request detail report. So if you go under scheduling reports, you have exactly that report, request detail, and it's going to list for you all your course offerings. If you want to see a whole department, you can choose that up top as well, or you can choose just one course. So if I want to see who's selected clay, I'm going to pick my 3D design class, and the default is that it's going to show it to me by alpha, which is fine. So I generate the report, and I get a list of every student that has picked clay as their class in alphabetical order. Giving that to the counselors and saying, okay, we have too many students signed up, we need to take 10 kids out, here's the list of students, work on it, make your notes, that kind of thing. So that's a great use of this report. The other thing that's nice is you can actually also run it down here by grade in alpha. I found that helpful because unfortunately, as we know, a lot of times if we're moving students out, especially of an elective, it's probably going to be ninth graders. That senior might need that class as their fine art requirement, whereas the ninth grader has time. So if I'm taking students out of an art class or a clay class, it potentially is going to be the ninth graders. So if I run it by grade in alpha, I have the option now, as it loads, it's going to run just my ninth graders first and then just my 10th graders. So I can see just a little bit more easily, I can focus just on the column of ninth graders and look at those students as who I need to take out. So it's instead of going through the whole report and finding every ninth grader, it just isolates it for you a little bit differently. The last report I'm going to show you is actually a report that I don't find helpful, but if you look at it, you might think it would be, which is course projections. And course projections is a report that sounds like it would be your load study. It sounds like it would be the report that tells you how many sections you need. But what it actually is it solely takes information from my app and creates your long-term projection, what you would need in 15-16, 16-17, and 17-18. But the problem is this is only based on what rolls over that one snapshot of time when we take it, as Dave explained, from my app into walk-in scheduler. At that moment, that's what this course projection is based on. And we don't go back and make changes in my app. From this point forward, we work in walk-in scheduler. We make all of our course adjustments in walk-in scheduler. And that makes this report, unfortunately, out of date by the second day after you've rolled from my app. So that's why I say it's not helpful. Long term, yeah, it gives you some planning ideas, but it really doesn't give you concrete information on what you're doing with how many sections you build and your course assignments, because it's just a snapshot. It's just a picture in time. So I only show that to you because I made the mistake of using this report first and found out very quickly it was not beneficial. So those are the 5 reports that I found most useful to me as I went through the process of building the master schedule.
Looking when you go through the reports, it seems really cumbersome to have all those bell schedules loaded in. Why do we have them? Why do we need them?
That is a great question, and one I'd love a better answer to. From February until the day before school started, there was just the regular bell schedule. So the master schedule report was much smaller. The day before school started, all the bell schedules went in. That was the first we saw.
So the reason you have one to start off with is because the schedule wizard. Because of the way that you've got these 4 classes, that grid doesn't get built out properly when you start having these 3 here, different occurrences. The reason why they're added in right before school starts is because attendance. On a particular day, if you're really only going to have periods 1, 2, and 3, that day needs to be on the calendar because that's how attendance is tracked. So it looks at the system and it says, okay, well today only periods 1, 2, and 3 are occurring, so only teachers that are teaching a period 1, 2, and 3 would actually even see to take attendance. So they couldn't possibly accidentally mark a kid present for a class that they're not supposed to be in. Does that make sense? Because it's a direct, in campus, the attendance is linked directly to the period schedule, so the period schedule has to match what the day really looks like to track accurately. That's why, and that's why you start to have some of those, like, if you really want to track an exam day where you're only going to have periods 1 and 2, but they're going to stretch for 4 hours each or something like that, you can do that with a period schedule, but we just don't put it in there until we really need it because it's really just an occurrence of the whole. Just think globally of any different way a day could occur, like in total length of time. You know, one day might be 8 to noon instead of 8 to 3 or whatever, or in a different periods they're meeting. To track that accurately, we do it through period schedules. It would be unrealistic to think I can just create this today and have this tomorrow, because, you know, someone on that team would probably have to create it, and we have to script in all of those placements of things. So we try and do it ahead of time as much as possible to create all those period schedules, but we don't want to put it in until the last minute and all the master scheduling's done. I mean, so we try and think proactively and say, well, what are all the different ways a day could occur? You know, minimum day testing days, you know, odd even testing days. What it was really designed for was to handle rotations, like a true AB day where, you know, that kind of thing. And we still have a lot of schools doing that, or mod blocks and things like that. But in a lot of these cases, it's not really handling a rotation, but as far as the system's concerned, it really is. It's a different way the day is occurring. You could just run it for the regular, per se. You don't have to run it for everything across. You can just focus on that one once the year starts. But unfortunately, it's in the schedule. It is, yeah.
So the only question we had as far as building then, from this point until, say, the day before school, will we be able to operate within the Wizard with just the one bell schedule again, and then have it expanded out the day before school?
Yes, that is the way that we would recommend doing it, and that's actually what I did for him to do that demo. Is I blew out all the other ones, and we get you back to that one regular, so it's very, you know, black and white, easy to deal with, and then the day, you know, whatever, 2 days before school or whatever, just script out those placements. You mentioned something really key about that you use the student gap scheduler to find a period that kids weren't. You technically can also do that with the seat count report. A lot of people don't realize that that's another report to look at. I'll be the first to admit it's a ton of numbers on there, and a lot of people get really confused with it. You can go ahead and generate it. But what we find is with a lot of people who manually build schedules out, in other words, you're not using our auto builder, people are all doing drag and drop. We're creatures of habit. We tend to front end load or back end load our schedules. We put more sections in the first half of the day versus the second half. If you look at the center number there, just on like that regular, the 2332 and the 2251, what you're looking for there, and that's actually pretty good, but see how like third period it's down to 2,000 as compared to 22? That's a 10% disparity of seats. So you're probably going to have more kids with a gap in period 3 than you would in period 1 and 2 because you've got 200 less seats. So when you're looking at this, you want a nice even balance there. So if you are going to create another section, this can kind of point you to where it might be the most advantageous to drop that.
Is this a report that could ever be expanded out by grade level?
You got to scroll through all your period schedules, but then you'll actually see the grade breakout. There's grade 7.
Oh, okay, there we go. Oh, okay. Yep, there's all the grade breakouts.
And that's especially helpful with middle schools because everything's a lot more, you know, delineated between courses. High schools, when you start having so much blending.
Yeah, so you can see grade 9 versus period 1.
The number on the left is your total number of rosters. The number in the middle is the total number of seats. The number in parentheses is the total number of rosters spoken for through a request. So in other words, the difference between the first and third number is basically how many gaps you kind of are sitting at. So like if your middle number is really close to that number in parentheses, you've got a very tightly constrained schedule because almost every single one of your existing seats are spoken for through a request. That's what those 3 numbers are. If you run it before you load kids, obviously you're not going to have any numbers, you know, no rosters or anything like that. You're just going to have the seats and requested seats. You're going to have the 2 right numbers. There's nothing you can do on this report other than run it. So a lot of people just look at it and they see all the numbers and they go, that doesn't really tell me anything. It's actually a pretty useful report in terms of exactly what you mentioned, looking for why am I keep seeing these kids? It's because you don't have as many seats in period 5.